initiative segment of tonight's forum. There are 17 of them, so we're going to be moving along quickly. We've attempted to find people to represent the yes and the no positions on each of the initiatives, but without success, as we've said. So in some cases, a person is representing a position that he or she does not personally support, but has researched their presentation. So I'll ask folks when they're presenting to let me know if they are, to let you know that issue. Lastly, we've grouped the initiatives by issues to keep the discussions cohesive. So your program, which was this wonderful program that Judy Popowski put together, is not listed in order of ballot initiatives, but in groupings. Also, I want to point out the back of your program has some very good websites for objective information about the initiatives. We also want to thank very much the folks who have come here tonight to present a position. So we'll start with the education-related initiatives, Prop 51, 55, and 58. Val, is George going to be joining us?
Right. I'm Val Mahowski. I'm a retired teacher, and I've taught 30 years in the Anderson Valley. And during that time, I experienced quite a few different buildings. So the first education one that we're going to be dealing with is the school bonds funding for K-12 school and community college facilities. And then what it is a school bond. It authorizes $9 billion in general fund, $3 billion for new construction, $3 billion for modernization of the K-12 public schools, $1 billion for charter schools and vocational education, and $2 billion for California community college facilities. And why do we need this? Well, it has been 16 years since the last school bond passed, and local school districts have been asking for school bonds and getting school bonds, and they look to the state to match their funds. And the state coffers school bond money has vanished. So people say, well, that's an awful lot of money to borrow $9 billion, and it'll cost the state money to borrow that money. And that's very true. But there is a real need. The public school system from kindergarten through grade 12 has about 6.2 million students, 10,000 schools, including 1,100 charter schools, 950 school districts, and 58 county offices of education. When we look at our community colleges, it's pretty amazing. 2.1 million students at 113 campuses, and there's 72 community college districts. And these colleges offer courses in English, other basic skills, citizenship, as well as providing work, training, associate degrees, and preparation for transfers to the university. Now, is that it? Stop. Okay.
So, Mary Pat, you have a minute in opening.
Also, I forgot to mention I don't have my glasses on, so you might have to wave it.
I'm the pseudocon. So, what's interesting in this, basically the opposing view is that it should stay local. That local people should make the decisions. Local people should pay for them as well. But the other argument against it is that it would go to first in line, and that large wealthy districts would receive the lion's share of funding because they have the resources to quickly apply for the funding. So I kind of see that as contradictory. I mean, on the one hand, they're saying local would be more fair, and yet literally in the opposing literature, they're also saying that wealthy communities would benefit from voting against it. So it's a kind of double think kind of opposition that has me as a person who's to talk about the opposition to it kind of confused. But I'll give the confusion to all of you.
Okay, there's a question here. The lottery is supposed to fund education. Why is it not enough money? Is the money really going to education?
The money from the lottery is going to education, but provides very little. That's actually about like 1% of the total education budget. And it will allow the schools to do special things for kids, but it does not provide any building funds. The building funds have to come from the state, and the way that the state raises money to do that is through school bonds. This school bond will help the districts to modernize their schools.
Okay, are there any more questions on Proposition 51? Any other comments, closing comments?
Well, I'd just like to say that this is not a tax increase. It has very tough accountability. And the thing that makes it really special is there is local control. It's written into this that the local school districts will have control as to how the money is spent for the new school. If you've ever taught in a portable, and those are those little boxes that they call schools, you'll understand that it's really important for kids to have windows. It's very important for kids to have enough room to move around. It's very important for kids to have access to the outside. And those things happen in new schools.
Mary Pat, do you have anything to say in the opposition to Prop 51?
As I said before, the argument is that that local control, that it doesn't give enough local control, and that simultaneously that local control would mean that wealthy districts would benefit more. So it's a confusing, of all the opposing arguments that I read, I found it confusing.
One more. What is the interest on paying back the bond? What is the interest rate on paying back the bond?
The interest rates, yes. Well, as we all know, when you borrow money, you pay back quite a bit. And so the total cost for this will be $17.6 billion. $9 billion will be the principal, and that will be able to be used by the schools. $8.6 billion is the interest that will be on that.
All right, we're going to move on to Prop 55, tax extension to fund education and health care, extends temporary personal income tax increases approved in 2012 by Prop 30 on incomes over $250,000 for 12 years to be used for education and healthcare funding. About 89% would go toward K through 12 schools and 11% to state community colleges. Prop 30 otherwise will be phased out beginning 2018. We have joining us George Young, speaking in support of Prop 55, and Mary Pat is again the pseudocon. Yes, good name.
Hi, my name is George Young, and I taught for 18 years and then went to work for the California Teachers Association. And if you think back to 2012, when our state and our whole country was still suffering a serious economic crisis, our schools suffered huge funding cuts. Thousands of teachers and other employees were laid off. Class sizes grew. We lost valuable programs like art and music. Vital services in healthcare, social services, and libraries also endured these crippling cuts. And that year, a broad coalition was formed, including Governor Brown and school employees, the Democratic Party, a bunch of people, to put Prop 30 on the ballot. And Prop 30 passed. And that allowed us to stop the bleeding as a state and to begin to invest in schools again and other important services too. Prop 30, however, is set to expire, and we stand to lose billions of dollars for schools and local services, and that's where Prop 55 comes in. Prop 55 would temporarily extend the current income tax rates only for the wealthiest Californians, those making $250,000 as an individual or over $500,000 as a married couple, and it's a couple of percent increase on what they currently or what they paid previously to Prop 30 on the amount over that. And the quarter-cent sales tax, which was a part of Prop 30, is still going away. And so that will help our middle-income families as well as businesses.
Thank you. Mary Pat, speaking against?
The opposition, as is common in this kind of bill, are from taxpayer associations who don't want taxes increased. I think we all recognize that. And the reasons that they choose on this specific one, one, that they were promised that Proposition 30 would be temporary. That's one argument. The other argument is that it's not needed. So, right.
Okay, are there any questions? Any cards coming in? Then if you would like to take another minute to talk more about the proposition, if not, we can move on.
Sure, but great comment on the not needed response. So first of all, Prop 55 is not a new tax. It maintains the current tax rate for 12 more years. And it's set to generate between $8 and $11 billion. And all of the revenue goes into the Education Protection Fund. And it's a dedicated fund that the legislature can't touch. Aside from helping schools, it allows $2 billion to be used to improve access and preventative care for low-income children and their families. And as we all know, healthy kids go to class. So beyond that, the education and the healthcare investment, the money will also, if there's excess money, that also goes into the rainy day fund, which is established to regulate those ups and downs in the years when, that we all know, happen in the state. But this initiative also includes tough accountability measures, annual audits. In short, here it is. This is critical for education. Our students and their schools and colleges can't go back to the days of massive cuts. As well as this money will help fund, if you're not aware of this, we've got a serious teacher shortage going on right now. Just hiring people in our local districts in Lake and Mendocino counties is tough right now. And this money will help alleviate that. Okay, yes, I'm 55, thank you.
All right, and the third in the education grouping is Prop 58. English language education. It repeals Prop 227, English for the Children Act, that English-only instruction be provided along with 1-year sheltered English immersion, and requires school districts and county offices of education to provide English learners with a structured English immersion program subject to parental preference as to the language acquisition programs. So, Val?
And you don't have to remember all of this because you're going to get this.
Val's
227 pages
document,
which will tell you everything you want to know and more than you want to know about all of these initiatives.
and Val speaking in favor of Prop 58.
Okay, 58. Well, let's do a little background.
In a minute.
Currently, there are 2.7 million California public school students in elementary and secondary who speak a language other than English. So 2.7 million. Schools classify about 1.4 million of these students as English learners, meaning they are not yet fluent in English. English learners make up 22% of all public school students in California. More than 80% of those English learners in California are native Spanish speakers. Now, in 1998, California voters passed Proposition 227, which was do it in English. It required English learners to be taught in English, and it restricted bilingual programs. So under that, if a parent wants their child to learn in Spanish or have any Spanish instruction, they have to sign a waiver. And so what this initiative does, this initiative was actually passed by the California legislature, but the California legislature cannot undo a proposition. So this proposition will give schools and teachers the ability to use bilingual education. Also, an added benefit is that our English-speaking kids can learn another language.
Okay, Mary Pat, would you like to give your version of the opposition?
So there are two reasons given. One, being surrounded by English speakers leads to faster English language acquisition. For all of us who have traveled to other countries, that is true. I mean, I find if I'm in a South American country, my Spanish improves significantly. So that would be an argument given by them to apply to children, not adults. The other, schools shouldn't return to methods that haven't worked, is the second argument against the repeal. And I was unable to find any research that backed that up, so I can't speak to that further, but hopefully Val or David can.
So let's look at the world. It's changing very rapidly. Today, technology allows even the smallest business to have a global reach. Students proficient in English and a second language will be much more employable and start out earning higher wages and make California workplace better prepared to compete for jobs in the global economy. So we still will be teaching kids in English, but we'll also have the option of being in a bilingual program. And as a teacher, bilingual programs work. When I was teaching in Anderson Valley, we were teaching kids that just started to have an influx of Spanish-speaking kids. And we were trying to teach these little guys to read in English when they didn't speak English. And so we got a couple students that were fifth graders that came in that spoke Spanish, and we taught them to read in English very quickly. And we said, how did this happen? Well, if a child learns to read in their native language, then they can read and transfer that to be able to read in English. And so that's what I became a great believer in bilingual programs.
Okay, is there any other comments on Prop 58?
I would just say this has pretty broad support. When the School Boards Association, the teachers, and the California PTA all agree, vote yes on 58.
Great. Okay, I want to thank Val Mahowski, George Young, and Mary Pat Palmer. And we'll be moving to the second grouping, which is healthcare related, and we're going to ask the next group to be on deck. Linda Fox and Galvin Graham, if you want to come on up. So the next two initiatives are Prop 52 and 56. We have joining us David Weiss, who is Vice President of Operations with Adventist Health. Thank you for being here, David. And Judy Poplowski is one of the sorry, I know there's two Judys, is one of our members who is taking positions for the benefit of the forum. So Prop 52 is a state fee on hospitals, federal Medi-Cal matching funds. Federal Medi-Cal helps fund state Medi-Cal. California hospitals receive $2 million in additional federal money beyond Medi-Cal payments, but some of the matching funds have been diverted to state general fund. This obligates use of funds for hospital care for Medi-Cal patients and health care for low-income children unless upon a 2/3 vote of legislators. So David Weiss is taking the yes on 52 position.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Glad to be here. So Medi-Cal as a program has been in effect in the state of California for over 50 years, and it's become a vital part of our healthcare system within the state, providing a safety net for Californians that are most vulnerable, our children, our elderly, and as well as those who are in lower income status. Proposition 52 continues a partnership that began in 2009 between hospitals and the federal government, where the hospitals within the state of California, including Ukiah Valley Medical Center, pay into a general fund that then gets matched by federal dollars. So these dollars that come back to California hospitals to subsidize the Medi-Cal care are coming at no additional tax cost to California taxpayers. The current law is expiring in 2017, and this proposition will continue the work that began in 2009.
Thank you. Judy?
I'm presenting the side of the people who are against 52, and what I could find that they say is that the proposition would divert resources from patients and communities to special interests, that there's no independent audit built in, no oversight, that we would need another proposition to change the fees that are set by this one, and that hospitals in the past have been fined millions for misuse of these funds, and that because of not having any oversight, they expect more to happen under Prop 52.
Are there any cards coming in? Any questions? All right. Would you like to continue then?
Yes. So Proposition 52 actually strengthens accountability at the state level. Instead of lawmakers having the ability to divert funding that goes into this much needed program, it requires the funding to stay within the Medi-Cal program from this match from the federal government, which helps provide health care for our children, seniors, and low-income families. And one of the most important pieces of this program is Ukiah Valley Medical Center is an example as a local healthcare entity. 27% of the patient population that we serve benefits from Medi-Cal coverage. And without this much needed additional federal matching funds that don't come at an increased taxpayer expense, it allows us to continue to expand and improve and offer healthcare services that would otherwise be very difficult to offer in our community.
Thank you. Are there any other comments either of you would like to make on Prop 52, the hospital fees? Okay. Let's move on then. The second one in the healthcare grouping is the cigarette tax, Prop 56. Cigarette tax to fund healthcare research and law enforcement. Increases the cigarette tax to $2 per pack. Allocates revenues primarily to increase funding for existing healthcare programs, also for tobacco use prevention, control programs, tobacco-related disease research and law enforcement, University of California physician training, dental disease prevention programs, and administration. Again, David Weiss is speaking in favor, a yes on Prop 56.
Yeah, so Prop 56 increases California's cigarette tax by $2 per pack, with an equivalent increase in products containing nicotine derived from tobacco. So the American Cancer Society, American Lung Association, California American Heart Association are all in support of this. The fact is that smoking kills 40,000 Californians each year, and smoke-related healthcare costs cost California taxpayers $3.5 billion annually. To bring this a little bit close to home, here in Mendocino County, we have one of the highest incidents of mortality from tobacco use in the state, with 852 individuals per 100,000 dying from lung disease, compared to the state average of 636,000 per 100,000. We have a serious problem with tobacco and smoking in the county of Mendocino, and increasing this tax, as has been modeled in other states, will reduce the use of tobacco products.
Thank you. And Judy, what does the opposition say?
The folks who are opposed to 56 mainly seem to be interested in the distribution of funds that would be gained from the $2 tax. I don't know the date of Proposition 98, but 98 said that we were supposed to give 43% of all new taxes to the schools. And this particular tax on cigarettes is being exempted. The bottom line is that only 13% of the revenue from this would go to prevention of tobacco use, in other words, the education of the kids. Much of it would end up going to provide more Medi-Cal services without the requirement that we have to take in more Medi-Cal patients. But still, the biggest issue seems to be that there won't be enough money directed toward education from this proposition.
All right.
What's the current tax?
87 cents on it.
All right. Increasing cost of tobacco cigarettes. Does this include any to be paid by marijuana users as well? It is smoked.
That's a very good question. I believe this is primarily focused in around nicotine-related products, so I don't believe it will impact marijuana.
And the next, will e-cigarettes also be included in this bill?
Yes, they are.
All right. Any closing?
Yeah, just in closing, each year 17,000 California kids get hooked on tobacco, and about a third of those will die from lung-related diseases. And it's estimated in the modeling from other states that have enacted increased taxes that for every 10% increase in cost of per pack of cigarettes, teen smoking drops by up to 7%. So Prop 56 will continue to prevent more childhood and teens from becoming addicted to nicotine, which will increase their health care costs and mortality throughout their lives. So thank you for supporting it.
Judy, do you have anything in closing?
No, except that I would ask you to read the proposition, or at least the summary that comes in your thick booklet, in case I have missed some important point.
And again, the websites on the back of your program are excellent information sources that I think are much easier to read than the ballot, the actual language. The next two initiatives, Prop 62, repealing the death penalty, and Prop 66, the change in the death penalty. And joining us for these positions are Linda Fox and Galvin Graham. Prop 62 is, this proposition repeals the death penalty and replaces it with life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Applies retroactively to sentenced inmates. Convicted persons must work in prison and increases to 60% the portion of their earned wages applied to victim restitution orders. So, speaking in favor, in favor of Prop 62 is Linda Fox.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you about Prop 62, known as Justice That Works. Prop 62 would end the death penalty and replace it with life without the possibility of parole, which means exactly what it says. Prop 66 claims that it can fix the death penalty system. We'll talk about that next. Of the 30 states that have the death penalty, California is home to, by far, the largest condemned population, with a total of 743 people on death row. As some of you older voters may recall, if there are any older voters in the room, the death penalty was declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1972, and states were required to rewrite their statutes to comply with that ruling. Many states abandoned the death penalty at that time, but California created a new law known as the Briggs Initiative, and the death penalty was reinstated in 1978. Since 1972, we've executed 13 people at the staggering cost of $5 billion, or about $384 million per execution. Our state constitution requires that we both prosecute and provide defense counsel for anyone charged with a capital crime. As a result, a death sentence costs approximately 18 times more than a sentence of life without parole.
Okay, you'll have more time.
Well, I'm almost done. It's very short.
Okay.
I promise. The death penalty is most frequently reserved for minorities and the poor. As we like to say, those without the capital get the punishment. As with the prison population in general, a large percentage of those on death row have significant mental health issues. Juries do not always get it right. Since the death penalty is reinstated, 125 people have been exonerated and released from death row, including 3 in California. You may say that indicates that the system works, but in every one of those cases, these people were saved by lawyers or groups who worked for free to exonerate them. The system clearly did not work for them, and I urge you to vote yes on Prop 62.
All right. Galvin Graham is speaking in opposition to Prop 62.
On Prop 62, join us in voting no on Prop 62. Let's be clear on what Prop 62 does. Prop 62 says the worst of the worst murderers get to stay alive at the taxpayer's expense, decades after committing horrible crimes, mocking pain of the victims and families. The death penalty is reserved for only the murderers like child killers, rape, torture murderers, serial murderers, and cop killers. Just 1 to 2% of about 2,000 murders in California annually end up in the death sentence. Proposition 62 says that these most heinous crimes should have no higher level of punishment. We disagree. For the very worst criminals, there needs to be the death penalty. We all know California's death penalty system is broken. The death row inmates are now able to file one frivolous appeal after another, defying justice. No answer is to mend, not end, California death penalty laws. Prosecutors, law enforcement, and the families of the murder victims oppose 62 because it jeopardizes public safety, denies justice and closure to the victims' families, and rewards the most horrible killers. Backers of Proposition 62 want you to believe they are protecting wrongly convicted death row prisoners from being executed. But in a meeting with San Francisco Chronicle Governor Brown, a former general attorney, said there's no innocent inmates on California's death row now. Backers of Proposition 62 say to save taxpayers money. Who are they fooling? Proposition 62, taxpayers are on the hook to feed, clothe, guard, house, provide health care to brutal killers they did not deny until they die of old age.
Okay, we're going to give you each a chance to respond to what the other has said.
Well, one particular point that I thought of when I was invited to speak here is that you in Mendocino County should be very proud to know that you have no one on death row.
Yay!
I think at one time there might have been, but it's been a long time ago, and there's no one from Mendocino County. And that would be great, except that the machine that runs the death penalty is a cost that's borne by all of us. And out of the 58 counties in California, 80%, more than 80% actually, I'm being kind, more than 80% of the death sentences come from 5 counties. And I'm sure you could name them: Los Angeles, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, and now Kern. But we all pay for this machine. We all pay for this monster, whether or not we have people on death row or not, from our state. And the provision, it's easy to make fun of it because these people who do work in prison make very little. But death row prisoners, as the statute is designed now, are not permitted to work. They're single-celled, they're not allowed to be double-celled, and they're not allowed to work in the prison. If this bill passes, they will be dispersed from San Quentin to prisons across the state, high-level, level 4 prisons, the highest level we have, and they will be permitted to work. And whatever earnings they make, 60% will go to the victim restitution. And the only other thing I have to say is we're better than this. We are. The rest of the world is better than this. And it's time we stop killing people who kill people to show that killing people is wrong.
Okay, Mr. Graham?
On that thing, you commit a crime, you play the game, you pay the price. You kill somebody, you die. You did it, you paid the price. Why should we take somebody that goes out and murders 3 or 4 people and keep them alive so they can say, oh, well, I got away with that? That isn't right to the people of the families. Think of the families that have to know that this person that took their daughter's life, like Polly Class, knows that this man's going to live forever, and they have nothing. The deal is, if you do it, you pay the price of what you did. The price is the death penalty.
There's one question here, and I'm sorry, I can't read the last name. I'm sure I should know it, and I don't. Richard Dean killed Rosie Grover and is on the death row. Why give him a break now?
If he had not gotten the death penalty, it's like Richard Allen Davis, you said Polly Class. If he had not gotten the death penalty, we wouldn't even know his name. The family would know his name, and I understand their grieving. But the reason we know his name is because his case has gone on for decades. When we sentence these people to death, we really make them infamous because the appeals go on and on and on. And every time that family has to come back to court and they have to go through it again. If they're sentenced to life without parole, they go away. You know they will die in prison. They will leave when they've taken their last breath. And the family can begin their closure. They don't have to relive it every 3 or 4 years in their court proceeding.
We're out of time for this initiative. There's one question that I'm going to modify a little bit, and you can choose to answer or not to answer. Are you Christians?
I choose not to answer.
Okay.
No, I don't think that's relevant.
Just want to make sure everyone's question is asked.
No, that's fine. It's fine to ask.
All right, we're going to move on to, how are we doing with time? Okay, keep moving. All right. Prop 66 says, it changes the procedures governing state court appeals and petitions challenging death penalty convictions and sentences by designating county superior courts for initial review review petitions and limits successive petitions, imposes time limits on state court death penalty review by requiring court-appointed attorneys who take non-capital appeals to accept death penalty appeals, provides exemption from prison officials to develop other execution methods, and requires death row to work and pay victim restitution. And on this proposition, Mr. Graham is speaking in favor of it, and Linda Fox is speaking against it. So, Mr. Graham?
California elected law enforcement leaders, police officers, frontline prosecutors, and families of murder victims ask you to reform California death penalty system by voting yes to Prop 66. We agree that California's current death penalty system is broken. The most heinous criminals sit on death row for 30 years, with an endless appeal denying justice and costing taxpayers hundreds of millions. It does not need to be this way. The solution is to mend, not end. California death penalty, the solution is yes in 66. Prop 66 was written to speed up the death penalty appeal system by ensuring that no innocent person is ever executed. 66 means the worst of the worst killers receive the strongest sentence. 66 brings closure to family and victims. Prop 66 protects public safety. These brutal killers have no chance of ever being in society again. Saves taxpayers money because heinous criminals will no longer be sitting on death row at taxpayers' expense for 30 years.
Okay, we're at the end of the time for that.
All right. This proposition claims it can fix the broken death penalty system and speed up executions. The proposition makes promises it simply cannot keep. It provides no way to pay for the modifications that it requires. One provision would require lower courts to take on death penalty appeals, which are now heard by the California Supreme Court. The lower courts are already overwhelmed, and adding death penalty cases to their calendar would completely consume their time and deprive citizens with other legal matters of access because of its strict deadlines. One particularly troubling provision would require any lawyer who takes court-appointed cases to take death penalty appeals. These cases are extremely complex and time-consuming, but the compensation is low. A lawyer refusing to take a death penalty appeal would be punished by no longer being appointed in other criminal cases. It is an attempt to force lawyers who are not familiar with the complexities of death penalty litigation to take appeals and lose their source of income. The promises made by Prop 66 cannot be kept. They have offered poor solutions to the process in the state courts, but the majority of time in death penalty litigation takes place in the federal court system, over which Prop 66 has no control.
Okay, that's the minute.
Okay.
There's no questions that have come in on this, so we will go ahead for 1 minute each to continue your argument or to rebut.
Prop 66, here's what it proposes does. All state appeals should be limited to 5 years, not 30 or whatever. Every murder sentenced to death will have a special appeals lawyer assigned immediately. Currently, it can be 5 years or more before they're even assigned a lawyer. The pool of available lawyers to handle appeals will be expanded. The court trials who handle the death penalty trials and know them best will deal with the initial appeal. The state Supreme Court will be empowered to oversee the system and ensure appeals are expedited while protecting the rights of the accused.
Okay,
All right.
thanks. Lynn, go ahead.
It's
Another minute.
difficult for me to imagine the incredible pain suffered by families who've lost someone to murder. If execution would do anything to aid their healing, I would not be here. Ending the death penalty will result in swift and final justice. We'll no longer learn the full names of people like Richard Allen Davis because they will no longer be in the news for decades, nor will we risk executing an innocent person. Killing people who kill people is simply wrong. We've evolved into a better society than this. We should not be asking state employees to kill for us. Please vote yes on 62 and no on 66. Let's join the rest of the free world and end the death penalty. And it's important for voters who care about this issue to know that these two are opposed and both cannot win. If both get more than 50%, then the winning proposition prevails. But they cannot both happen. One has to. If neither of them get 50%, then we're right where we are now. But I've left some literature in the lobby, and anyone who's interested, I really encourage you to pick it up. Also, look at the website justicethatworks.com.
Thank you. And I'm going to. We don't have any more questions. Thank you, Galvin Graham and Linda Fox. And I'll ask Kate Gaston and Judy Popowski, if you come on. I know you're doing two different ones, but you're both doing both of them. No. Thank you. So the next propositions we're talking about involve plastic bags. Prop 65 it redirects money collected from sale of grocery and retail carry-out bags to a special fund administered by the Wildlife Conservation Board whenever existing state law bans free distribution of any particular kind of carry-out bag or mandates sale of a certain kind. So we have...
Can we start with Proposition 67 first? It would make more sense.
That's right. You said that, and Prop 67. This ratifies Senate Bill 270 that bans plastic bag single-use carry-out bags, but allows such use for various perishable items. Stores must charge 10 cents for recycled, compostable, and reusable bags, and allocates $2 million for bag manufacturers to help retain jobs and shift to thicker, multi-use, recycled plastic bags. So Kristana Arp is speaking in favor of Prop 65, and
no, she's going to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're
doing 67. I apologize. Kristana is speaking in opposition to Prop 67, and Ellie Schachter is speaking in favor of. So Ellie, 1 minute.
This is the ban on single-use plastic bags. It's a referendum, and in two parts. It prohibits grocery and certain other retail stores from providing single-use plastic or paper carryouts, and it permits sale of them. The Attorney General has said that there is a minimal, relatively small fiscal effect on state and local governments, and it's important to know that this law was passed in 2014, and many local areas, cities, counties, or townships are already observing it, as we are here. The referendum will now apply to the whole state, the parts of the state that have not paid any attention to this law. And we'll talk about the arguments in favor of this bill later.
All right, so since this ban already holds here in Mendocino County, I'm going to we'll be voting on the rest of the state, and I'm going to raise some sort of philosophical issues that the opponents of the plastic bag ban are arguing. People who oppose the ban on plastic bags say, bag bans are the result of a small group of very vocal people pressuring willing politicians into implementing their personal bag choices through rules implemented on businesses. 10 reasons bag bans are bad for business. Bag bans regulate what incentives businesses may or may not offer customers. Small businesses are being used by the government as the imposers of a bag choice that the people and even businesses do not want. Bag bans force businesses to change from inexpensive, compact plastic bags to expensive, larger paper bags. I'll stop there for now.
Okay, do you want to take a minute to add or rebut?
Well, the arguments in favor of voting yes on Proposition 67 come in four major ways. One, the proposition would help our environment by reducing litter, protecting oceans and wildlife, and reducing cleanup costs. The second argument in favor of voting yes, the proposition would continue California's success in phasing out plastic bags. Nearly half the state has already banned plastic bag use. 3, the proposition is opposed by 4 large out-of-state plastic bag companies and a number of, in California, other grocery stores and companies like that. And the fourth reason to oppose this proposition, that's your part. My part is the fourth reason to vote yes on this. We have this law, but it hasn't been implemented in the whole state. And the statistics show that less than 5% of the plastic bags sold get recycled. And this amounts to roughly 15 billion single-use plastic carry-out bags, and it amounts to an average of 400 bags for California.
Thank you.
Okay, so I didn't mention I'm the pseudo-con too. I'm filling in to read the against arguments against banning plastic bags. Continuing. The ban will require business to offer free paper or reusable bags to customers who participate in public assistance programs. Bag bans set a dangerous new precedent where government dictates a minimum price on an object they deem undesirable. Businesses see increases in shoplifting. That's interesting. Heavy use of reusable bags results in spread of diseases and germs. Again, I'm just reading these.
Okay, we're out of time though, so.
Okay, I'll stop.
All right. Then we're going to go to Prop 65, carry out bags and charges. This redirects money collected from sale of grocery and retail carry-out bags to a special fund administered by the Wildlife Conservation Board whenever existing state law bans free distribution of any particular kind of carry-out bag or mandates sale of certain kind. In this case, we have Kristana speaking in favor of this act, and Ellie will be speaking against it.
Okay, again, I'm representing the people arguing in favor of Proposition 65, and actually one of the problems with this, people say that it's very confusing, and it is very confusing. But Proposition 65 says that the 10 cents that groceries now charge for plastic bags will go to a special fund, and this fund will be used to support environmental programs. And the main gist of this is that supposedly the way it is now, the grocery stores are making this big profit off of this 10 cents that people pay for the plastic bags. And it's very much against these grocery stores making all this extra money.
All right, and Ellie, would you like to give comments?
Sounds good that the money would go to an environmental organization, but many organizations, the nature groups, are opposed to this. For example, the California Fish and Game Commission says yes on 67 and no on 65. This is true for the California League of Women Voters, Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club of California, and it's also supported the Governor, Jerry Brown, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, and Treasurer, all say no on 65 and yes on 67. Includes the California Democratic Party, California Peace and Freedom Party, San Diego County Green Party, and many other groups.
Great. Thank you both so much. We're moving on to Prop 53. This is it requires specific legislative approval for projects that cost more than $2 billion, and repayment requires new or extended taxes or fees, and that specified project information for all state bonds be included in voter information pamphlets. Adds a new article to the state constitution, and we're going to have Kate speak on, give us an overview on both sides of this initiative.
Well, I just want to say that when I said I would do this, I thought, oh, this is the most boring one possible, but it turned out it's not the most boring one possible at all, in any way, form. So it does say something about going a little more in depth than that little paragraph that comes when you want to find out about an issue. Most people probably are aware now that to pay for construction projects such as roads and bridges, the state often uses money from taxes. But another way it does it by selling a special kind of bond called a revenue bond to investors. This is somewhat unusual that this bond is being put up as a voter initiative because it's really been done basically. I'm going to do the con against, okay? So I'm doing the no first, okay?
All right.
So it's basically done at the initiative of one specific millionaire that lives down in the San Joaquin Valley that paid for the whole initiative, put the whole thing together. And so it was interesting to realize that his driving factor is that he wants to ensure that the state cannot vote in a big bond to cover the cost of renegotiating the waters from the Sacramento to the San Joaquin River. So that was an interesting sub-fact. But I'll go back to being a little more organized and doing the proponents here. A yes vote would be in favor of requiring voter approval, and it applies to any projects that are financed or owned or operated to this amount, $2 million above. Now this is important, or managed by the state or by a joint agency formed between the state and a federal government agency, another state, and or a local government. It also prohibits dividing projects into multiple separate projects to avoid statewide voter approval requirements. So you can't be clever and break this 3 million thing up into two 1.5 millions. Proponents also argue that politicians and state agencies are currently allowed to borrow billions of dollars without getting voters' approval. It really eliminates a sense of transparency. It would hold this voting yes would hold politicians accountable. It also does not impact local projects, the University of California freeway construction, or natural disaster response. It closes the loophole that allows politicians to issue massive new debt to pay for multi-billion-dollar projects. Now, I'm an opponent at this point. Okay, I'm an opponent, and vote no in favor of continuing to allow the state to issue new debt without voter approval. While the state's legislative analyst has noted it is unlikely there would be very many projects large enough to be affected by the measure's requirement for voter approval. This is a constitutional amendment and therefore will be enforced in the future, one that cannot be anticipated and one that cannot be foreseen. In California, we've had a little experience about putting things on the ballot and approving things that become constitutional law, and discovered it's not quite that easy to change them later on when we're feeling the repercussions. Proposition, if passed, will take away local control by requiring a statewide vote for many local projects, even though they are funded by local users and taxpayers. And that's because when you are putting together a project that you may need to do a coordination with any sort of other organization that's coordinating with the state, and you're forming a joint association, you will then find yourself under this $2 billion rule. Therefore, we feel it will prevent or delay repair and maintenance of so many of the pressing infrastructures that the state currently faces.
Great. Thanks, Kate. We're going to be going on to Prop 54. No question. Are there any questions?
Is this about a big water project?
Well, I'm glad to answer that question, because that is the major question, that is the major emphasis that we believe the proponent, this big huge landowner in San Joaquin Valley, is what he's actually put this whole process together about, because it will create a system where voters throughout the state will get to vote on this water shift, the development in the Delta, where they're putting the tunnels, the goal is to put the tunnels through to move the water between two, and then therefore would create a situation where people from all over the state would be able to vote on how effectively the regions and segments of the state can move water, which we've already realized has to be done. So you're right, this is a big initiative behind this, is to create a situation, put in legislation where they won't be able to pass the money to do that water system. Yeah, thank you.
I'd like Jonathan Opet and David Eister to come up while Judy Popowski talks about Prop 54. Prop 54 requires every bill to be in print and online at least 72 hours prior to the vote, and that audio-visual recordings be made and published online within 24 hours. Judy is presenting both sides of this.
This proposition requires posting all legislation, and so that not only the legislatures but all of us can read it 72 hours ahead of a vote. It would make government more transparent, because you could find the bill that you're following and make sure it says what you want it to say. And it would allow you then to complain to your assembly person or your senator if you didn't think that it was correctly written. It's going to prevent the process called gut and amend, which has to do with getting to 11:58 and a deadline of midnight and changing a bill very last minute without a lot of consideration. And so It would definitely help transparency, and many cities are already doing this, and we, on the pro side, think this would be a good idea. Now, on the con side, it sure sounds like a good idea, but the problem is that any minor change would put the bill into a cycle of having to go through another 72-hour waiting period. And this could really tie the legislature up in knots, and it would probably cause some issues in some of the last minute kinds of things that have been done in the past, like the Fair Housing Act that was passed last year, and some special bonds to address the drought that was passed last year. Had the 72-hour limit been in place, those might not have made it. This measure was developed by Charles Munger Jr., who you may have heard of. He's a very conservative person who has opposed things like the $15 minimum wage and education funding, and he is the only funder on the yes side of this particular proposition. So the no folks think we should not pass 54. Forgot where I was there for a minute.
Thanks, Judy. So we're moving on to Prop 57. This is Parole, Early Release, and Juvenile Trial Reform Initiative. It increases parole chances for felons convicted of nonviolent crimes and give them more opportunities to earn credit for good behavior. Also allows judges rather than prosecutors to decide whether to try certain juveniles as adults in court. And yes, Margaret and Robin should be coming on stage. So we are happy to welcome David Eister, who is our district attorney, and he will be speaking against this initiative, and Jonathan Opit. And could you tell us, I'm sorry, I introduced Mr. Eister. I'm not sure if you're representing
Deputy Public Defender.
Of course, that's
right. My name is Jonathan Opet. I'm an attorney with the Office of the Public Defender in Mendocino County.
And so if we could start with the yes on 57 position at 1 minute.
Thank you. Proposition 57 is the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act of 2016. It does two things. It requires judges and not prosecutors to decide whether a juvenile is tried in the criminal court. Currently, prosecutors can decide whether a juvenile is tried as an adult and sent to prison. Proposition 57 would no longer allow a prosecutor to make that decision. Instead, a judge would decide. Second, it amends the California Constitution to allow for early parole consideration for state prisoners convicted of non-violent offenses. Prison sentences in California usually involve a principal term plus enhancements like prior convictions or gang participation. Proposition 57 would allow for a prisoner to be considered for release from prison on parole before serving time for the enhancements. It also allows the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to shorten sentences for prisoners who participate in education and rehabilitation programs. Proposition 57 reforms the criminal justice system by enhancing public safety and promoting rehabilitation. Vote yes on Proposition 57.
And representing the no position.
Good evening. I appreciate you all sticking around to hear us. Prop 57 is called the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act. It's kind of like the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act that we all voted for in 2014. Everyone was in favor of safe schools and safe neighborhoods. We've had a spike in crime as a result of Prop 47 passing. We're going to have even worse when Prop 57 passes. Prop 57 treats all recidivists and serial inmates as first-time, one-offense criminals. So if you go out and you commit 10 separate crimes and a local judge says you're going to be punished for those 10 crimes and you're going to go to prison, prison authorities will be able to ignore 9 of the 10 sentences imposed by the judge and simply give you half time on 1 of the 10. Good time, work time is already awarded at 50% to most people going to state prison. What they're saying here in 57 is they want to get more than 50%. So a 3-year sentence will be less than the 1.5 years that you currently get. It'll be something close to a turnaround. I'll just answer some more when I got that stop right there. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Opeth, would you 30 seconds for a rebuttal?
Thank you. During the past 40 years, California's prison population has grown 600%. Years of so-called tough-on-crime laws have caused our current mass incarceration crisis. In 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered California to reduce its prison population. Proposition 57, led by Governor Brown, is a smart step toward reducing California's overcrowded prisons and enhancing public safety. When deciding how to vote on Proposition 57, ask yourself these questions. How comfortable am I with a prosecutor and not a judge deciding if a juvenile is sent to prison? And should California reduce its prison population and provide better incentives for prisoners to participate in education and rehabilitation programs? Vote yes on Proposition 57.
Mr. Eisner, 30 seconds.
You know, I've been your elected district attorney for 5 years. I've not ordered anybody to prison in that 5 years. I've been a prosecutor. I've been in the criminal justice system for 30 plus years. I've never once seen a prosecutor send anyone to prison. What you're hearing here is that the prosecutors are doing these things. No, the local judges are the people that decide what sentence should be imposed. And right now, the juvenile side of this case, I have no problem with it. If you want a judge to decide that, but that's not what happened. You heard from Ms. Popowski about the gut and amend, and that's what happened to Prop 57. They took a juvenile section and they put in very dangerous adult language that had nothing to do with juveniles. And so when you talk about, you heard this applies to nonviolent criminals. Up front, make sure you take a look at this and see this is a partial list of what Prop 57 considers nonviolent. It will blow your mind.
We have a question from the audience. When we release nonviolent felons early, what training or support will be offered to help keep them from recidivism?
Well, what Proposition 57 does is that it offers an incentive for state prisoners to participate in education and rehabilitation programs while they're in the state prison and afford them an early opportunity to be released back into the community.
Well, the answer, if you want the real answer, it's nothing. Prop 57 does not provide any funding or new programs for rehabilitation or re-entry into the community. There's nothing there. And so what we're going to get is folks being released. And by the way, it doesn't even define what the rehabilitation programs or educational opportunities should be. So you check a book out of the prison library, that might be enough to get you an extra 180 days off your sentence for reading a book. It's if you read the editorial in the San Jose Mercury News, I put these all up on the Mendocino County District Attorney Facebook page. The Mercury News says it's sloppily written and it shouldn't be passed because there's so many questions unanswered.
Okay, we'll give each another 30 seconds to make final comments. Mr. Opeth?
Thank you. Please vote yes for Proposition 57 because California's prisons at this time are severely overcrowded, and it's the result of years of policies that have not worked towards providing less recidivism in the state of California. The state of California has been moving towards smarter policies to reform crime, and Proposition 47, which was put forward by the governor's office, is another step towards that smart reform on crime.
And 30 seconds closing.
Please use your institutional memory. In 2011, we had AB 109, which was called realignment. 500 felonies were removed from eligibility from going to state prison. Then we had Prop 47 in 2014. It was to reclassify non-serious and non-violent people to misdemeanors. All those people were taken away. They've run out of the non-violent people in prison. So, for example, when you take a look at this list, exploding or attempting to explode a destructive device at a health facility, church, bookstore, library, courthouse, a judge's home, or a school is nonviolent. Raping an unconscious woman, remember that case down in Stanford? That's nonviolent. So take a look at the list before you fall for the nonviolent that you're hearing about. This is about letting violent people, rapists, murderers, robbers, back into community early. Treating everybody like a first-time offender, one crime defendant.
Thank
That's
you.
not what we're about.
Thank you both very much for being here. All right, we're going to be moving on to Prop 59, and if Kristana and Judy could come up for Prop 60. Prop 59, overturn Citizens United Act advisory question, asks voters to advise whether California elected officials should try to overturn Citizens United versus FEC by constitutional amendment or other ways in order to allow full regulation or limitation of contributions or spending, and to make clear that corporations should not have the same constitutional rights as human beings. We have Margaret Koster speaking in favor of Prop 59, and Robin Sunbeam is a surrogate against Prop 59.
Okay, well, thank you all for hanging in there. So Proposition 59 is a citizens advisory. It's very similar to Measure F, which we passed here in Mendocino County by 75% in 2012. And it is a sort of a sense of the voters. So it's letting our elected representatives in the state of California know that we, the citizens, are deeply disturbed about the corrupting influence of money in our elections, and we want them to take steps to do something about that. It has broad support. Some of the organizations, not all, but some of the organizations are Money Out, Voters In, Move to Amend, Common Cause, California Clean Money, Free Speech for People, People for the American Way, and Public Citizens, etc. Our Assemblymember Wood, Senator McGuire have endorsed it. Representative Jared Huffman is a co-sponsor in the House of Representatives of an amendment proposal. And for those of you Mendocino folks, Bernie Sanders wants you to vote yes on it.
Robin?
It is an advisory measure, and as such, it's got no teeth or claws. It has no enforcement piece. And so one big opposition, or the opponents, the official opponents are Senator Jeff Stone, a Republican from District 28, and Representative K.H. Chadjian, a Republican from District 35, and they both say it doesn't do anything. Why are we muddying up the waters? Why are we putting this on the ballot? There's already so many initiatives on the ballot. Why are we even wasting taxpayers' money on something that does nothing?
Margaret, would you like a 30-second rebuttal?
I got my 10-second notice.
Okay. We appreciate it.
Okay, so the word that's been used is clutter. The ballot is cluttered. Yes, the ballot is cluttered, but there is no reason to pick on this particular initiative as being the cause of the clutter. The citizen advisory has actually been rarely used in California, only a few times in our history. One of the previous times was back in the late 1800s when the citizens of California passed an advisory in the 70% range in favor of the 17th Amendment, which was the direct election of senators. So This is also a constitutional issue, and it's really important for the voters to let our elected representatives know how we feel about clarifying the Constitution as to who has rights and the role of money in the proper role of money in politics.
Robin?
So more opposition. Some people are saying that the language is so vague and it could mean anything. It doesn't specify anything. And also, it does say that corporations should not have the same rights as natural persons. So does that mean that it recommends more rights for corporations? So maybe we can just make corporations citizens and elect them for president. So it also, the LA Times came out against it, and for all the regular reasons. That first, amending the Constitution is a difficult process, and not every unwise Supreme Court decision justifies amending the Constitution. But then it came out later in another article in favor of it, and it said, why not take advantage of this opportunity to make a statement?
Okay. Thank you, Margaret Coster and Robin.
Oh, but I had more.
Well, I'm trying to move us along because we are really running late.
Okay, so I left some literature on the table up front, and you can see the text of the advisory there, and I am in the phone book.
I have one more thing I have to say, though.
Quickly.
The League of Women's Voter is opposed to Prop 59 because they believe that corporations need to have their rights, and we don't want to take rights away.
Okay. Thank you both. We're going to talk about condoms for a while to get people woke up here. Okay, speaking on the Prop 60, Christina Arp is speaking pro and Judy Poplowski is speaking against. And I'm not going to read this. They can explain what it is.
Okay, I decided to become involved in community politics, and here I'm talking about plastic bags and condoms. So, Proposition 60 is would be, if you vote for it, a law that requires visible condom use in adult films. And the people arguing for it, nobody should have to risk their health in order to keep their job. A vote for Prop 60 is a vote to protect California adult film workers from disease. Porn producers refuse to provide a safe workplace for their performers. As a result, thousands of workers have been exposed to serious and life-threatening diseases. Prop 60 closes loopholes in the existing law and improves enforcement so pornographers can more readily be held accountable for the same workplace protection law that applies to every other California industry. Proposition 60 only holds adult film producers, directors, and agents accountable, not adult film performers, and a lot of medical associations are in favor.
And Judy, you're against condoms.
Well, actually, there has been a law in place since 1992 requiring adult film producers to have their performers wear condoms. This law is an attempt by a man whose name is Michael Weinstein, who is the president of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and he is trying to get himself a job. And the way he's doing that is he's saying, if this law passes, and this is actually in the proposition, if this law passes but it's challenged in court, the state of California will have to hire him to fight the lawsuit, and he would not be able to be fired except by a 2/3 majority of both legislative houses. And so I don't believe that's a good idea. As far as protections, we already have them, and the performers are frequently also producers, which is why it would open up people to lawsuits on this proposition.
Anybody else? Do you have any other comments, or have you covered the points?
Does the new law provide more regulation and enforcement than the original 1992 law?
Yes, it does. One of the things they say is that 1992's law is ignored sometimes. But the other statistic is that only one case of on-site transmitted HIV has occurred since 2006. So even though it claims it is to protect the performers, in fact, it's really Michael Weinstein trying to get himself hired.
Great, thank you. So we're moving on to we'll move from condoms to drugs. Perry Cowler will be presenting the pro position, and Judy Popowski the against. Go ahead.
Would you like me?
Sure.
My name is Perry Cowler, and I'll be speaking on behalf of, my name is Perry Cowler, and I'll be speaking for Proposition 61. I'm going to give you a piece of information that might be strange to you. Michael Weinstein was the one that put together this proposition, and it's interesting. He is with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and he has joined with the California Nurses Association and ARP. What this proposition does is it places all of state payer, Medicare, prisons, anything where the state of California is paying for a drug, then we utilize, and because of this, the negotiated price for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, or the VA. So what this does is it gives California the ability to bargain for large surplus amounts for drugs. It gives us better quality for arguments, or for negotiations. So, I'm sorry. So what happens with this is that $70 million was spent by the pharmaceutical industries, of course, to oppose this. And in reality, Bernie Sanders is a proponent of this. The chair of the Democratic Party was involved in writing this. Robert Wright is a proponent of this. And it's endorsed by vetsvote.org. The only thing that has anything to do with veterans has to do with the prescription drug price. And
okay, Judy, a minute.
Okay. I am a stand-in for this position, and that is that the drug companies would change the prices on the drugs upwards so that the veterans would have to pay more, and then when the state comes in and can only pay that much, well, the drug companies will still make lots of money. Also, they might change the drugs that they allow the Veterans Administration to buy, and it might raise prices for all of us because they're removing certain drugs from the market in California, which would mean that what's left is probably going to be more expensive. And the promoter wrote in provisions giving him the right to engage in lawsuits that where the taxpayers would pay the lawyers. So once again, we have Michael Weinstein looking for a job.
Val and Val and Kathy should be up here. Val, you're going to be up next. You're on deck. Okay, go ahead, Perry.
so I'm going to rebut that because actually what threw me was the Michael Weinstein thing. I hadn't even thought about that because I know that he started this initiative, and I started thinking, why would he do condoms and why would he do this? Probably his heart is in the right place. I will tell you that $70 million has been spent by the pharmaceutical industry to oppose this, and I'll give you a few numbers. Drug spending rose to $310 billion nationally, and the cost for specialty drugs in the state of California for CalPERS alone last year was $587 million. This initiative was put together after Martin Shkreli stood and took a drug from $7.50
to, I don't know, it was $750. This is the type of response that the healthcare industry, that's why it's backed by the Nurses Association, it's backed by people that are advocating for lower healthcare prices for all of us, for the state of California and the taxpayers. I find it fascinating that the Taxpayers Association for California is opposed to this. I do not understand why.
We have to be out of the building in 13 minutes.
It will save, just let me tell you, it will save $5.7 billion over 10 years for the state of California and for California taxpayers. I urge you to think about it.
Great.
I already made the points I was going to make.
Thank you, Judy and Perry. And let's see, Stephen Kramer, if you're here, if you're speaking for him. Okay. So now we're going to go to Prop 63, firearms. Val Mahowski is speaking in favor of, and Kathy Graham is speaking in opposition. Go ahead.
Okay. Proposition 63 requires individuals to pass a background check and obtain a Department of Justice authorization to purchase ammunition. This is a initiative about ammunition, really. Prohibits possession of large capacity ammunition magazines and requires their disposal. Requires most ammunition sales to be made through licensed ammunition vendors. Requires lost or stolen firearms and ammunition to be reported to law enforcement. Prohibits people convicted of stealing firearms from possessing firearms, and establishes a new procedure for enforcing laws prohibiting firearm possession. Requires the Department of Justice to provide information about prohibited people to federal national instant criminal background check system.
Thanks. And Kathy?
Okay, my name is Kathy Graham. I represent the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Our head office is in Fullerton, California. I'm a recruiter from San Francisco to Reno to the Oregon border. Proposition 63 would not be beneficial to firearm holders in California, including law enforcement, as it would be costly, ineffective, and just another ploy to restrict the use of firearms in California. Proposition 63 would require courts to adopt not only costly time and consuming systems, but gives courts absolutely no say in doing so. According to the Legislative Analyst Office, the repercussions of Prop 63 would cost California up to tens of millions of dollars annually forever. As Proposition 63 is funded by wealthy individuals, it consequently imposes new fees that will disproportionately affect low-income people, harming their ability to protect their families. Prop 63 raises the price of ammunition, making it difficult for average law-abiding gun owners to purchase ammunition for their safety. In many ways, Prop 63 creates unnecessary disclosure requirements on one's abilities to purchase ammunition freely, so that it would even prohibit the exchange of ammunition between family members. I have more, but I'll.
Okay, we'll take 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Okay, Proposition 63 will keep us safer by reducing gun violence. How many of us remember 20 first graders at Sandy Hook killed, 6 adult members of the staff? How many of us remember Orlando, 50 killed, 53 injured? How many of us remember San Bernardino, 16 killed, 21 injured? How many of us remember Columbine, 12 students and 1 teacher? In 2015, there were 25,000 gun-related deaths, or injuries, 12,000 gun-related deaths, and 39 massive shootings. This happens because people have access to this ammunition.
Okay, in 2015, the FBI came and gave us a report. Assault weapons It's interesting to know that assault weapons are rifles, albeit only a portion of the overall number of the types of rifles available. Accordingly, the FBI said 252 people were killed with rifles in 2015. Nearly twice that figure, approximately 595, were killed with hands, fists, and feet, etc. These numbers are not unprecedented. The 2014 Uniform Crime Report showed that the number of people killed with a rifle that year was approximately 251. Over twice that figure, approximately 607, being killed or beaten to death with hands, fists, and feet.
Kate, this is the question, where does this proposition have anything to stop criminals? Is there anything in this?
Can you say that again?
Is there anything in this proposition that stops criminals from purchase?
Yes, there is. There is a section there that says that people that have, let's see, creates a new court procedure to ensure the removal of firearms from prohibited people after they are convicted of a felony or certain misdemeanors.
That's already on the law.
Okay, 30 seconds each for closing.
That particular law or amendment or proposition is already on the books today. It's not going to stop the criminal. The criminal is going to have ammunition, whether we like it or not. We don't want, and please vote no on Proposition 63.
The access to guns, and especially to ammunition, that allows people to do multiple murders should be prohibited. And it's just unconscionable that we in the United States allow so many of our people to be killed.
Thank you
May I
both.
say one more
Very
thing?
quick.
I just want to let you know also that the State Police Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Office or Sheriff's Association, District Attorneys Association, and the State Correctional Officers Association also want you to vote no on these propositions.
Thank you, Judy Graham and Val Mahowski. And now we're at Prop 64, the last initiative. Thank you all for hanging in. And it's on marijuana legislation. Judy Papaus, no, she's not. Kristana is speaking against the measure.
And Kristen Nevedal for the pro.
All right. Go ahead with pro. 1 minute opening.
Oh, 1 minute opening. Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do with that. I was told I had 6 minutes, so we'll get through as much as I can.
We have 5 minutes before we have to vacate the building.
Okay, well, perfect.
One.
So my name is Kristen Nevedal. If Proposition 64 passes on November 8th of 2016, it will authorize the possession, transportation, purchase, consumption, and sharing of up to 1 ounce of cannabis and 8 ounces of cannabis concentrate by adults 21 years of age and older. Proposition 64 creates a comprehensive regulatory framework for the adult use of cannabis within the state of California and does so in a method that's parallel to the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act passed by our state's legislature in 2015. Additionally, Proposition 64 includes provisions that support small California businesses, such as requiring that applicants be California residents in order to qualify for a commercial license, having licensing fees be scaled to the size of business. Proposition 64 goes on to preserve local control, and I will stop there.
Okay, I am not speaking against Proposition 64. I'm reading parts of a letter that Stephen Kramer, the police chief of Cloverdale, sent to me so kindly. I reached out to him. He said it's too bad he couldn't be here.
Read the letter.
At the outset, I want to say that my city council and I are in favor of a comprehensive, regulated cannabis-related business industry, and he says that the city of Cloverdale and Cloverdale Police Department are now working together to get an updated cannabis ordinance. He asks, why do I oppose Proposition 64? The Adult Use of Marijuana Act was written primarily to create a new business and only includes minimal protections for the public, and that it causes public health harms. This act strips the regulatory framework of hard-fought provisions found in the last MMRSA, such as complete local control.
There is a question here. Does Prop 64 allow big business to move into the county after 5 years?
Proposition 64 does create a Type 5 cultivation license, which is a license that allows for more than 1 acre of outdoor cultivation or more than 22,000 square feet of mixed light or indoor cultivation. However, those licenses can only be issued at the discretion of the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and they are subject to a review of anti-monopolization policies before CDFA can issue those licenses. So there is no mandatory issuance of those licenses, and then additionally, if they do choose to issue such licenses, the Type 5 cultivation license, those license holders are not allowed to distribute their own product, whereas other license holders under Prop 64 would be allowed to do that.
Okay, any other questions that are coming in? Take another minute to continue with your presentation.
Okay, and should I go first? Yes? Okay, great. So Proposition 64 does also create some excise taxes to help generate some revenues for the state. So Proposition 64 implements a 15% excise tax on the sale of medical and non-medical cannabis. However, Proposition 64 does serve to protect patients by exempting medical cannabis patients with a state-issue ID card from that 15% sales tax. Additionally, it creates a cap for the cost of the ID cards. Currently, medical cannabis ID cards are subject to costs depending on which county you're in. So it sets a $100 fee for ID cards, a 50% reduction on the ID cards for Medi-Cal, and free cards for Cal Medical Services Program participants.
Okay, are there any, do you have a point?
So the chief of the Cloverdale Police Department goes on and says, the proponents of the initiative want to go beyond legalizing marijuana. They want to normalize, commercialize, and advertise marijuana in a similar manner to how tobacco was treated in our country decades ago. This act prohibits local jurisdictions from banning indoor personal cultivations. That's what he says. This act does nothing to help law enforcement identify drugged drivers. They talk about the record in Washington State that there's been car crashes because of marijuana use. And then they make a claim that organized crime filings associated with marijuana charges in Colorado have increased 400% since 2006. With substantial increases occurring after the state commercialized marijuana.
Do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, $10 million of the tax money annually, $3 million of annual tax money is distributed to the California Highway Patrol for 5 years to establish DUI protocols. And then additionally, 20% of the monies that are in the remainder of the tax pool actually goes to state and local law enforcement to work on law enforcement issues around the enforcement of legalization. However, to your point about not being able to ban indoor cultivation, that is of the 6 plants for personal use. Cities and counties do have the ability to prohibit outdoor cultivation. But if cities and counties choose to prohibit outdoor personal cultivation and or commercial cannabis businesses, they are not eligible for the 20% or for a portion of the 20% monies that go to state and local law enforcement.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you all.